Hi, everyone. Before we start the show tonight, I have one quick announcement to make. We're attempting to put together a small event this year at Cedia in San Diego, and we're going to try and call it HomeTech Happy Hour. The idea is that we'll all meet up Thursday or Friday around happy hour sometime before we all break away to go to the bigger parties from all the vendors, and just meet up, have a couple drinks, and put faces to names and that kind of thing. So if you're interested and you're heading out to Cedia in San Diego this year, go over to our website, HomeTech.fm/happy hour, and fill out the form and let us know what day works best for you. This will help us get a better idea of who can make what day and, how many people there's going to be in general, because we don't even know. We know there's people that listen to the show. We know there's people that go to Cedia, but we don't know how many people would show up to something like this. So head over to HomeTech.fm/happy hour, fill out the form, let us know if you'll be there. We'd really appreciate it. Also, if you'd like to sponsor the event, we're open to that too. There's a little checkbox there. So check that off and let us know, and we'll be in touch. Thanks very much, and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the HomeTech Podcast. I'm Seth Johnson, joined as always by Jason Griffin. Jason, how you doing, man?
I got a feeling, Seth.
I've got a feeling, too. Tonight's going to be a good show.
A good show.
Tonight's going to be woohoo. Tonight's going to be a good show.
It's going to be a great show.
It's going to be, let's live it up. And I've got my money. No, I don't have any money. I've got a kid, so
yeah.
Scratch that lyric.
Need a few more patrons. Mixmaster in the chat room is ready for the party, though.
Mixmaster TJ, right? Oh
right.
No, there's actually
we got Mixmaster with us tonight.
Nice, excellent. Well, glad to see everybody in the chat room is filing in the doors right now. If you didn't know, we were alluding to a Black Eyed Peas song called "I've Got a Feeling," and that's kind of relevant and in the news these days because one of the famous people there, will.i.am, actually bought Wink out this week. Wink, the smart hub home, was bought by musician will.i.am.
Yeah.
Jason, what do you think about this?
This one came out of right field a little bit, but I got to say, Wink has had this long sort of twisting journey, and I wasn't totally floored. Like if there was any smart home product, if somebody would have come to me a month ago and said there's going to be a prominent smart home product purchased by will.i.am, I think I would have guessed Wink. What about you?
Yeah, man. Now the egg minder is owned by will.i.am, so that's all I know.
Yeah, it's a little bit out of right field. $38.7 million plus $20 million commitment towards future manufacturing is what they're saying. Details a little bit sparse on the inner workings of this, and not really totally clear on the reasoning and what this means for Wink users. I know that the sentiment over on Reddit was generally negative, and I'm putting that lightly. So we'll see. I guess thankfully, what you have to be thankful for if you're a Wink user is that you spent what, like $1 on the hub?
Right. Yeah. I think the hubs were dropped to $1 there for a while.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I spent $12 on my $50 egg minder. So, and then I threw it away because it didn't work. But yeah, I don't know. This is good for Wink. It's kind of one of those beloved companies that's been around for a long time, and I can kind of see how this would be negative, I guess, because it's a musician that's buying, or I guess I.am is the company that will.i.am owns, and he's a businessman. So if he sees an opportunity to buy something and that makes sense for him, good for him. This could turn around in 5 years' time, and he could have made something out of this. So we'll see what happens. It'll be very interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah, we'll see. I have to admit to not being versed at all in the business dealings of will.i.am, but the sentiment on Reddit was that I guess he hasn't had a very great track record, but I certainly can't speak to the details there. But anyways, it's an interesting story. There's not a lot more to say about it, I think, really, until we hear more or see how it develops. But definitely grabbed some headlines this week, and another interesting twist in what is becoming the saga of the Wink Smart Home Hub. But let's move on. We want to introduce our show here. We've got another a great episode, and we actually had CEO of Kirio, a gentleman named Rob Green, join us for an interview on this episode. And be sure to stay tuned for that. I thought it was a really interesting conversation. Kirio got some headlines not too long ago, so that may be a name that's somewhat familiar to you. But they're a new a startup in the smart home, but they're coming at it from I think a pretty different angle. That's almost, I think I can most accurately describe it succinctly, anyways, as almost a hybrid approach between what we're seeing a ton of, which is these DIY consumer products, and then the kind of the legacy old guard systems that have been around forever, professionally installed, Control4, Savant, Crestron. They're sort of in a middle ground. Like, they're definitely not targeting a DIY route. They're working with builders. They're really targeting new builds and remodels, and have some interesting strategies around that. But at the same time, the software is set up to be very simple to program and not leave the builder sort of scrambling to commission these things. So won't get into any more details now. Be sure to stay tuned for the interview, though, because I think it's a really interesting business model.
Yeah, absolutely. And no program. I mean, that's what they're committed to is making a system where there's no programming, which is extremely hard to do because somebody still has to program it, which is them. That's the secret. And it's really hard to do. And it sounds like they're doing well at it. It sounds like it's a very interesting product. So, Jason, this week we've got a big pick of the week.
We do. This is a good one, Seth. I said it last week. I'll say it again. My hat's off to you. You're finding some gems here, and this one comes from Hagai Feiner. And Hagai, if you may recognize that name if you're in the industry. He's the founder and CEO of Access Networks, a very well-known networking company focused on the CEDIA channel, and a great guy. I know Hagai personally, and I did not catch this tweet, but thankfully you did. It's a beauty. It is an absolute beauty. You've got a fireplace in a living room here.
Well, yeah, let's start with the fireplace. And Jason,
Seth, I'm gonna let you do a better job of these, so I'm gonna hand the floor over to you.
So yeah, every integrator knows that every builder and every homeowner wants the dang TV mounted over the fireplace, because generally the fireplace is centered in the room and there's a big blank spot above the fireplace that nobody knows what to do with. So of course we're going to put a TV there. Well, this beautiful picture has not one, not two, but 3 TVs hung above the fireplace all the way up to the ceiling. Oh man. And Hagai's comment on this was they must be watching TV using an inversion table, because you got to be upside down to see that top TV. I man, the neck strain just on a regular TV mounted above a fireplace is enough. I mean, I can't imagine having 3 TVs all the way. I mean, this looks like high ceilings, like 15-foot ceilings, and these TVs are almost all the way up. That's crazy.
It is a gem, and I think one that we can safely file under just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, and integrators need to learn how to say no. If not for your dignity alone, just say no.
I'm sure that client paid probably good money for that. So
yeah, I think for each TV going up. Yeah, I think for each TV going up, I think I would charge an extra $300 for Oh, you want 2 TVs? Well, man, we're going to have to get a lift in for that, or we're going to have to put the scaffolding up. It's going to be $300. Oh, you want another one? Well, that's going to be another $900. Man, you sure you want that TV up there?
Yeah.
The good thing is this guy's got room for one more. It's like,
if you have room for growth, he's future-proof.
What happens if one of these TVs go bad? Like, these are the same match TVs all the way up. Is he going to have
Nobody thinks about that.
Oh, just awful. Just awful.
Well, it's another gem, and definitely head over to HomeTech.fm/173 if you're interested in seeing that. And of course, for those of you joining us in the chat room tonight, Seth just posted a picture up there. Speaking of the chat room, before we jump into our news segment leading up to the interview, we want to give a big thank you, as we always do, to our supporters of the show. For those of you who are not familiar, you can become a patron of the Home Tech Podcast by visiting HomeTech.fm/support. Once again, that's HomeTech.fm/support. If you're interested in contributing to our efforts here, you can do that for as little as $1 a month. We've had a bunch of people come on board and do that. We really appreciate it. And even at that $1 a month level, You do get access to our private Slack channel, which has really become a great community. And so we would encourage you, if you're a supporter of the show and you enjoy what we're doing here, take a moment to head on over there and check it out.
Absolutely. And I want to thank everybody who is also who supported the show, but also who is coming out tonight and joining us in the chat rooms to cheer us on and jeer us on as we go through the live show tonight. You don't have to support us to listen to the live show. We try and do this every Wednesday around 6 or 7. I guess 6:30 is usually when we start recording, but sometimes we can be as late as 7:30, and then when we're having Skype problems, a little bit later. So thanks for everybody for coming out and listening to us talk on the internet.
Seth, I'm gonna do you a favor because you're an East Coast guy.
Sorry. So we start 6:30 Eastern time, the one true time zone, the only one that matters.
Seth tends to forget, for those of you who don't know, that there are other time zones out there.
Yeah, it's so sad that they don't matter that much. It's only Eastern all the time. I can't wait till we go to San Diego. I'm going to be really messed up.
Oh, you're going to be totally screwed
I strolled in 4 hours late.
I think we'll get through it.
Where's Jason? I thought we were recording.
Yeah, right. All right, but let's dive in. We've got a number of stories here we want to touch on before we get into our interview with Rob from Kirio. First one we want to hit relatively quickly here, a follow-up from a story we talked about last week. If you didn't tune in, there was a bunch of talk going around in the tech press and some stories circulating about Roomba, which is, of course, these little automated vacuums that you run around your house. And they were reportedly going to be selling, homeowner information, maps of your house. Well, there was a follow-up, a number of follow-ups. We're reading from ZDNet here, and iRobot, the parent company of Roomba, really coming out and trying to clear the air. So they're now saying that the information that would be shared would be controlled, by the customer. They said they're never going to sell your data. So those were some of the headlines, right, that we were seeing, Seth. Yep. It was like Roomba wants to sell your data.
To the highest
they've
bidder.
Unequivocally denied that. Yeah. So I think some of those, who knows? It's hard to say where that stemmed from, but it could have just been sensationalism or, maybe an honest misinterpretation. I don't know. But at the end of the day, they're sort of unequivocally denying that, really saying that this is more a story about if you want your robot, your robot vacuum to work with your connected devices in your home, there may be ways that data about your home can supplement that, but that would, of course, be upon your approval only and never to be sold.
Right. I think we talked about this last week in mostly jest, and that the headline was definitely sensationalized, like selling to the highest bidder. Like that's not even how this works. Like if they want to sell the data, they're going to sell it to all the bidders. You don't even have to be the highest bidder. They're just going to put a price on it, and you walk away with the data. And of course, that's if the homeowner actually opts in to doing that, right? So, I think it's this is the slow summer that everybody kind of has to wade through, and this is what we get. So we get some of these sensational headlines and a little bit of follow up. But I think last week we kind of joked around with it more than we gave it credit for being actually a real story.
We did. Yep, you're right. So, anyways, that was all we wanted to say about that. I thought it was important to give that a quick follow up. Moving on here, a number of stories we want to touch on related to the Apple HomePod. So a firmware release apparently that was pushed out has been sort of hacked and picked apart, I think, by a number of sources. A developer by the name of Steve Troughton Smith is who we're reading from here. 9to5Mac reported this, has unpacked the code and discovered a bunch of new details. So some of the top line things here about the HomePod, it's running a full iOS stack. Not a huge surprise there, in my opinion. But there were a number of details here related to the touch screen. We won't get into all of them, what that's going to do. It says a touch surface will be used could be used to activate Siri with a long press. Illuminated part of the HomePod surface is actually an LED matrix. So it looks like initially it'll just be sort of plus minus symbols, but it could expand out to be different buttons and things like that. So that's kind of interesting. But I think the most relevant part of this story that we'll want to maybe dissect a little bit here is Despite running a full stack of iOS, it does not currently appear that the HomePod will support third-party apps or extensions. And so, my prediction is that will change over time, but it looks like on the initial release, it will not. So not a huge surprise in my opinion. It is Apple. We're not talking about Google here. It's not Apple's not traditionally known for having an open ecosystem. So again, I can't say that I was too surprised to read that personally.
Well, I'm gonna say I was more surprised. Like this is more information than we got from Apple at an actual developers conference. I mean, mostly because a developer has taken apart the firmware and gone through all the code lines and figured out that what was rumored to be this LED matrix thing or on top of the thing there was this rumor that there was a touch screen on top. That was kind of pulled back and said, oh no, it's not a touchscreen. Apple never confirmed any of this stuff. They never said what the little screen thing on top that kind of makes those makes the little Siri kind of like the blue and green and purple icon that kind of flows around. Apple never said what that was, and they never said if the top surface was actually a touchscreen, or a what type of screen it was in the first place. They never said if anything could be done besides those little flowy Siri thing, like the little I don't even know how to describe it, but the little Siri thing that kind of moves around when you press the top.
Yeah.
But now we know that there's an LED matrix there, which maybe be able to support different symbols. So what if you do if this does get tied into something like HomeKit or something, and you get a notification on it, it could have like a little red thing there, a red symbol of some type, saying, hey, there's something you should ask me about. So I think there's a lot of information here. And I think what this eventually leads to is that there's a whole lot about this device we don't know about. And this thing's coming out in December, September? It could be out next month or the month after. And Apple could release a whole bunch of features that we really didn't know about. This thing is running full stack iOS, which means it could do anything that an iPhone can do. And there are really no limits on iPhones. And I don't know. They said there's no, ability for it to do apps now, but that doesn't mean that there won't be ability to do apps later, especially if this device takes off.
Right.
So I could easily see that happening if this is a popular device in a popular platform. You've seen Apple do that with watches. They introduced the watch. They introduced the phone, and the phone didn't even have an app store until it took off. And I think it took a couple of years later before they introduced the app store and the ability for developers to actually write code onto it. So all that's coming. One of the other cool thing is they found sounds, Jason. They found sounds for this little guy. I'm gonna play him.
Oh yeah.
Here's a little alarm sound.
Ooh,
nice. Yeah.
It's pleasant.
So obviously, there's a way you can probably set up alarms and reminders and notifications that can come through and play on this device. I'm going to skip ahead, go to another one. Here's a timer. It's so pretty.
Yeah, that sounds very timery, I would say.
Well, that's timer1.wav. So there may be another timer in here somewhere.
Ooh.
Evidently, that was a passcode or something. So
wow.
Anyway,
sinister.
They pulled a bunch of stuff out of this code, and I think there's still, even with this, I think there's still some surprises that Apple can lay on us. When they actually announce this product, we came away knowing that there is this HomePod device, and it does integrate with HomeKit, but we don't know anything beyond that, right? Like we're still kind of in the dark about like what the absolute flagship features are going to be on this consumer product that was kind of shown off at a developer conference. So I'm pretty excited about it, and I can't wait to see what they actually do with this. Hopefully they don't keep leaking out firmwares in this phone, even bigger, I guess. In this firmware release that they did, there were little icons of the new iPhone 8, which kind of match up with all the rumor things that, it's going to be a complete, basically the front of the phone is all screen, and they've moved up the bars and the notification bars at the top where all the way up to the top where you have your time off into one corner and you have the signals off into the other, and the microphone or the headphone and the cameras like sit in the middle. Like there's been all these rumors that that's what the new phone's going to look like. Of course, Apple is mum on the subject. They don't say anything, but they accidentally have some junior engineers pushing out development code, and whoops, there goes there goes something we didn't want you to know. I guess they're going to have to. They're a big company, you know. We were talking about this before they started the show. They're making $5 billion a year just by doing nothing
in interest.
In interest, yeah, $5 billion. That is in of itself. That's a Fortune 500 company.
Staggering.
Yeah. That's
crazy. Well, I'm glad there are people out there much smarter than I am who can pick this stuff apart. I did find these stories interesting to read through, and we'll, of course, include some links to them. HomeTech.fm/173, again, will be where you find those show notes. Including, Seth, I think we should include these in the show notes, a couple of pictures that you found, various gentlemen on Twitter who were posting some of the different sort of file tree structures and code, and a lot of this is admittedly Greek to me, but I think for the bigger geeks in the audience who are into that stuff, go check this out, because this is really interesting stuff. And Seth, like you've alluded to, we just really didn't get a lot of information about what this thing could do, other than, you know, has really great audio. That was kind of the big thing for them. Obviously, it's got a lot of potential. I expect it to be a success. I think that the price point is on the higher end, like we've talked about, but Apple can command that premium, I think, and generally speaking, I don't know if it's going to be a huge success by Apple terms, but even a small success by Apple terms is pretty big. So we'll look forward to seeing more about that when it comes out. Speaking of Apple, getting a little more leaky these days. I mean, they've traditionally been known as a company that's very secretive, and you don't get a whole lot out of them other than wild speculation on the internet. A story on Mac Rumors here, a reader by the name of Thomas Jackson, who resides in the UK, discovered Apple is listing select movies as 4K and HDR in iTunes purchase history. Now, this, of course, is a bit of a surprise, since they don't technically support 4K currently or HDR. And so it looks like, who knows, something may have slipped there. But 4K may be coming soon. And again, another one of these things, I don't want to sound like a broken record, not a big surprise. They've got to do 4K. They've got to address that at some point. Everybody else is doing it. I know we've been really surprised that they've been neglecting that, but it looks like it may be coming sooner than later. So that's good news for Apple TV users. Yep.
And I think a couple of weeks ago, there was somebody who somehow ran across the testing of a identified device calling itself the Apple TV 6,2, which is their serial numbers internally. There's no such thing as an Apple TV 6,2 running tvOS 11. So the idea, and I think we talked about this at WWDC time, that Apple would have to release a new Apple TV to be able to do 4K with HDR. I think they can do 4K with the current line. Whether they do that or not is questionable. It'll be what they call faux K, FAUXK. But yeah, doing 4K with complete, the real 4K with HDR, beautiful picture for your nice 4K HDR TV screens. They'll have to release a new product because this generation that's selling right now, the Apple TV that's selling right now, came out before that spec was actually, the HDMI spec was actually released. So the rumor has been for a while that, and this kind of, is just building on it, that they were going to do 4K just in time for the holiday and just in time for everybody to, go out and get a new Apple TV and upgrade. What's cool is I'm wondering if they're going to upgrade their movies. Like if you've bought a movie this year or within a time frame, like, do you get a 4K HDR copy of it, or do I have to replace all my weird digital copies in the library? I'm really wondering how that's going to work. Like, what's going to happen to the 20 or 30 Apple TV movies that I've bought? Do I get a free upgrade to 4K, or are they going to stay at 1080p and then I'll have to pay for an upgrade or buy the movie again? I know what Hollywood would want me to do, but I'm not sure what Apple will do.
Yeah, of course. That's a good question. I really don't know. I admittedly have never been a movie purchaser on like Apple TV. We typically rent them. I'm not very, very few movies I've ever watched multiple times. So I don't know. For people with a large number, or even 20 or 30, like you mentioned, that's an important consideration. I don't know. It will be interesting to see what comes of that. But it is good to see the first early hints of Apple finally moving into that 4K space. And I guess it's about time, right?
Yeah, I think everybody else has been supporting them. Everybody else who has cheaper players, mind you, has been supporting 4K content for quite some time. And Apple is dead last in moving into this with the most expensive player on the market. So I'm like I said, I'm curious to see what happens. I'm trying to remember what they did with. Remember when we went from like the little. There was, I want to say like the second or third generation of Apple TV, like the little small one. And they went from 720p movies to 1080p movies. There was a transition there, and I'm trying to remember what exactly happened then. But it was kind of before my time, kind of on the Apple ecosystem. So I'm trying to think back and remember what exactly they said.
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I remember that vaguely, but I don't remember the details of how that worked.
Well, we got a feedback form, so if anybody knows, reach out to us at HomeTech.fm/feedback or reach out to us on Twitter at HomeTech Podcast.
Yeah, so let's move on here. A few OTT stories, streaming video we want to touch on. Looks like Comcast's live TV streaming service could launch by the end of this year. There's no official date or price on this. We are reporting based off a story from Engadget.com here. So again, no official date or price set yet. Earlier this year, there's been rumors circulating about this. Xfinity Instant TV is what they're calling it. It's sort of they've had a previous streaming offering here, and I can't seem to find the name of it in the story here. But it's not a brand new thing for Comcast to have streaming, but this Xfinity Instant TV is their latest and greatest that it looks like they're going to be pushing to market. This was reported during an earnings call with the CEO. Be more widely released. Here it is, rebranded version of Comcast Stream, which is available in select parts of the country now. Previous reports had this service pinned at about $15 a month. But again, the company said they've been testing different prices, so it's unclear what that final price will be. So looks like another entrant coming soon to the streaming TV market, becoming very, very crowded in a hurry here. This has been one of the recurring themes of the show, not necessarily something I predicted coming into 2017, but gosh, Seth, we just find ourselves talking about it over and over again. Ton of movement in the space.
Yeah, Verizon 1 week, Comcast the next week. I'm sorry, Comcast, you're not getting any more of my money. You took it for 2 years solid, and I cut the cord. So
and that's it.
I'm done with you. But I don't know. Plex is actually offering a live TV broadcast over to Apple TV and Android devices. So that may be something I look into in the future. They're now touting off a Plex live TV with DVR support, and it's now they've been running it in beta, but it's now officially out of beta. It's a premium feature tied to the Plex Pass subscription, which is I think $5 a month. You get a little bit more out of it than this, so you get remote access into your Plex DVR inside the house. You get a bunch of extra stuff. So it's kind of nice to have that pass anyway. I haven't done it yet, but as soon as I finish ripping all the movies to my Plex server, I'll be doing that and turning on the Plex Pass, which is really hard to say, turns out.
Incidentally.
Yeah. So, and I know they've been talking about this DVR for a while. So I'm curious as to see how that works, and maybe I'll hook it up, and if it works any better than the Channels app that I'm using right now, I may just switch over to it because it's funny. Like on the phone, we talk about having multiple apps to control things. Well, right now on the TV, I have multiple apps to watch things, but this is kind of like condensing everything down into one app. I've got all my movies, I've got my live TV and my DVR recordings in one spot, potentially.
Right.
So interesting movement there too.
Yep. So, improved offering from Plex. We talked about the new offering coming potentially soon from Comcast. One other sort of semi-related story here, Fire TVs. Amazon Fire TVs are getting expanded controls. So this is nice. Seth, I couldn't remember if we touched on this. I feel like this has been rumoring. There's been rumors about this for a couple of weeks now. But in any event, wanted to make sure we hit on it because Fire TV users now have the ability to integrate that Fire TV with their Echo. So control of the TV. And let's see, first new features, pair with any Echo devices on your Fire TV, enables you to control all playback through voice commands and perform also complex commands such as voice searches such as Alexa, show me comedy movies. So, that's a nice feature. I think I talked about it a few weeks ago. I finally purchased an Echo here at the house, and we're having a lot of fun with it. Got it on Prime Day. It was like half off, screaming deal. It's a blast. They're really fun. My wife and my 2.5-year-old daughter, I can constantly kind of hear them upstairs, having fun with it. And I got to say, that's one thing I didn't anticipate, having young children with an Amazon Echo in the house. I think anyone in that situation can relate. It very quickly becomes a toy and not something that I get nearly as much enjoyment out of as I thought I would, because it's constantly playing, Mary Had a Little Lamb or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So I can only imagine if I tied that thing into my TV, when my daughter gets to be just a little bit older, 3 or 4, the kind of chaos that might ensue from that.
Yeah, that's funny. That's really funny. My daughter can't speak yet, so right now she looks over at it while it's talking and smiles because there's different voices. Like, we use the news app on it, like the BBC World Services, and I think there's like Tom Merritt has a Daily Tech News Show thing that you can get on it. Yep. So yeah, when I'm making her like milk and stuff in the morning, I'm usually holding her and the thing's right there, so I just yell at it, and she's like, she sits there and smiles at it and kind of wants to reach over and touch it, but when she starts talking, we're going to be in trouble because she'll know all the commands. She'll.
It's funny. Yeah. It's just a great example of one of those things that you just don't anticipate about your personal user experience until you get the device in your home. And then you're like, oh, I didn't think about that.
I didn't think this $200 thing would be a kid's toy, but it is.
Yeah. So, we have a lot of fun with that. But anyways, let's move on here. Another story out of Ring. These guys, feels like they've just been on fire lately. New products coming at a very steady pace from the company, and now they have a new external security camera. So recently, not too long ago, they unveiled their floodlight cam, which we talked about a little bit and have touched on a number of times since. But this is a new Spotlight camera, I believe it's called, and Spotlight cam available in 3 versions depending on how you want it powered. So wired, battery powered, and a solar battery combo, which is kind of cool. So very similar functionality to the floodlight cam, nice smaller form factor. The story that I read did say that Ring still sort of sees the floodlight cam as the sort of the cornerstone if you're going to do it, and then you use these to kind of supplement and fill in areas around your home. But it looks like a pretty nice product. Gives you a few different options for how you want to install it and power it. Which is, more than I can say for other outdoor cameras that we've talked about numerous times and have come up frequently in the hub. As far as the pain of install, the Ring appears to be giving you some good options. So I don't know, pretty nice looking product in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, I think I'll have to go through it and find it, but I think TJ posted a really good install pic of a Nest Cam. The new 4K one, I believe, is which one it was. That was like ceiling mounted off of a standard camera, like ceiling mount type thing. It came down to that. The base was attached to that. So imagine the base flaring back out. This is the base that it sits on, flares back out, and then goes into the nice portion of it where the Nest Cam hangs from.
Sounds gorgeous.
The product would look great. Yeah, the product would look great if not for that, the base and no way to mount it and no way to actually. Oh, and the wire was kind of just like running right up into the ceiling. There's a big hole up there that they didn't do anything with. So yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
These are really cool. The floodlight cameras have the big spotlights on them for your security and everything. These have like little LEDs down the side that light up, and man, just looking at this, I can't imagine that those provide enough light for the camera. So I'll be really curious to see how well these actually do work. in the field. But man, they are, like you said, these guys are really on fire and coming out with these, 3 more products. One's wired. I like the solar one. Now the solar one, it's completely wireless if you think about it. I've been looking for something like this for maybe like security in a job site for a long time, where you could potentially mount this outside on a construction site, hook it up to Wi-Fi somewhere, and be able to record and see what was going on that construction site remotely at any point in time. This would be great for like homeowners and builders to use, so that a homeowner could actually look in and see what was going on the job site, or the builder to look in and see what trades are out there without actually having to roll a truck. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you could do with this. And man, for what, 300 and what was the
229?
I think it was like
229 for the solar.
I mean, that's a steal for. I mean, you would not believe the stuff I went through in the past to try and figure out how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like all in one package out of the box. What a great deal. What a really good deal.
Yeah. So the solar one is $229, which is only $30 more than the other ones, which are $199. So the wired and battery cameras, $199. 2-pack available for $348. It looks like. So you get a small price break there if you buy 2, and then again the solar model $229. Looks like the wired version is available for shipping right away, and the other 2, so the battery and the solar, are expected within the next couple of weeks. And as I'm reading this, TJ in the chat room was kind enough to pull up that image of the Nest Cam that you were describing, and you weren't lying. That's a beauty.
Yeah. It came out like right about the time that these Ring devices were released, so I kind of put them together in my mind. But these look great, and I like the little tiny LED lights on them. Like I said, it's definitely a design feature that, like, why isn't this on the Ring outdoor version? Like, these guys are thinking about their products and how they'll actually be used, whereas Nest isn't really. They're just putting a camera out to put a camera out, right? Like, the Nest outdoor camera should have lights on it, right?
Yeah.
I can't believe that point in the product has been missed. So if I was using anything, and I would use Ring. I mean, I've been super happy with the doorbell that I have, the Ring Pro, I think. Been super happy with it.
No, they're doing great. Company seems to be doing great. So, all right, cool. Well, let's move on. One final story here, a quick one, and then we're going to get into our interview with Rob Green from Kirio. Seth, I wanted to make sure that we put this one in the queue here, because I know this has been a big initiative for you guys and the rest of the team over there at Blackwire, and it looks like you recently launched a third-party automation marketplace, basically a driver marketplace. So give us the elevator pitch there.
Well, there's some marketplaces that exist right now for third-party developers that don't offer support or very good support, and we opened up. We've had our own driver store. We've had the Ring driver for Control4 on there. We have Ecobee for Control4 on there as well. So we've had the infrastructure in place, and it was just we were just kind of waiting to see what happened in the third-party market, and we decided to go ahead and open it up. We had we had a number of partners that joined in right off the bat that we were able to launch with. So HTI Customs, Greenfield Solutions, Hopsoft, TR Lunch, and Manfeld Services. All of those will be launching with us. We also picked up another one, Veritas Software, which does the HomeKit to Control4 driver, which is really cool. So I can't wait to get my hands on that and play around with it and see how well it works. But they're using the HomeBridge appliance, so you get a HomeBridge set up, and then he has this Control4 driver and that reaches over and talks to the HomeBridge, and all of your devices that are supported on HomeKit are sucked out of the Control4 project and put into the HomeKit ecosystem. So I can just swipe up on the phone and hit a light that I want to turn on and off. So I'm really excited about that, because I don't foresee Control4 conceding to HomeKit anytime soon. They're kind of big on the Android side, and up until recently, I didn't think there was going to be a way for them to do that. Like, now Apple is doing the software certification, so maybe Control4 could do that natively, but I'm not sure that's like big on their list right now. So we released the driver store had a bunch of people sign up, and it seems to be going well. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from dealers in the field, and we're out to make drivers great again. And we've got a little bumper sticker, so I'll put that.
Make drivers great again.
I'll put a link to that in the chat there.
That's the best part. I was hoping you'd get to that.
Yeah. So, we're a little quirky at Blackwire. At least I am, and when they let me do the marketing, so that's what I came up with.
When they let Seth into the marketing department, this is what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and the little no HD base T bumper sticker there too. We sell a lot of just head power, so that's kind of our little dig at HD base T systems.
That's not very nice.
Well, people ask me, why don't you like HD base T, and I said, I there's no reason I shouldn't like it. They keep us in business, so and they actually pay for my paycheck. So thank you, HD base T. More digs.
All right.
More digs.
Yeah, more digs. All right. Well, on that note, let's wrap it up here. We want to get our interview started. Once again, we had Rob Green. He is the CEO of Kirio, and a new startup here in the smart home, coming at it from what I think is a pretty unique angle. So I really enjoyed our interview, and we hope you do too. So let's get started. Hey, Rob, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, yeah, we appreciate you joining us and hanging out through some of the technical difficulties we had here getting this interview going tonight. Hopefully it'll be worth it, and we really look forward to chatting with you. So we're going to jump in and talk all about Kirio, and I think it's a really interesting looking product that I believe our listeners are going to enjoy learning about. But before we do that, why don't you give our listeners just a quick personal introduction, maybe talk about some of your background and what brought you to this point in your career?
Well, sure. So I've been involved in technology for the last 25 years. I spent a little time in telecom, and then I transitioned to software, and eventually found my way to Microsoft. This was 1997 late, and I was in the digital media group. I was there for 8 years, and left there to go to a company that called Nine Systems in San Diego, which we ended up selling to Akamai. And then I was involved in another transaction. And then I took over as CEO of a little company called Abacast, which made a live peer-to-peer streaming solution. And we turned it into kind of an ad company and sold that to Wide Orbit, which is based out of San Francisco, about 3 years ago. And I kind of was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. I felt like I like to be right in a market where the hobbyist part is going away and a product is just on the cusp of becoming, or technology on the cusp of becoming mainstream. And so long story short, I found my way to Kirio. I really thought what they were doing is the right direction. And like many of my friends and people I know, like myself, have been a do-it-yourselfer guy. And it just feels like that's sort of coming to an end. And that's why I came on board in March as CEO.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool. So a nice diverse background. And I think, given what you described there in terms of trying to time where you enter an industry, I think you're in a good place here with the smart home. Obviously, there's a lot of development going on and a very solid foundation of a history, I should say, that we're building on. But it really does feel like we're on the cusp of something much bigger. So with that said, let's tee it up here and give us the elevator pitch. The shortest version that you can, because we're going to jump in and talk about a bunch of the details. But what is the elevator pitch? What is Kirio?
Sure. So simple way to think about it is really what Kirio is we're not the sprinkler system, the door alarm, the light switches, or anything like that. We're really, to put it in computer speak, an operating system for the home. And we're built into the home by the builders. So I think it's the first product really like this. I haven't seen anything else quite like it. What we do is we connect not only the wireless systems, but all the wired core systems as well. And we're able to manage those things in a holistic manner for the whole property. So it's built in, we're sold to builders, and we automate and manage the entire home.
Excellent. So, say I'm a builder and I come to you, Kirio, and I say I'd like to buy one. What do I get? What physical product comes from you to me and is installed in my homes?
Sure. Let me back up a second and just explain. There's sort of, and I'm being very general here, two camps today for home automation. There's the do-it-yourselfer, buy an Alexa or Ring doorbell or something like that, and then on the other side, what I call the legacy systems, the Savant and Crestron, where their business model is dependent on selling programming time, and they're not for every home. So in the middle of that is the entire building industry, which has really kind of been left out of IoT. There aren't products that fit the way a builder works today, except for Kirio, which means they don't want to ever have to do any programming. That's a paramount aspect of how we work, why our product works the way it does, and it has to be as inexpensive enough to go into almost any home. So if a builder went to us, they would go to the same places they buy the existing building products they get today, and that's the wholesaler. We don't sell Kirio retail. They would go to the same place they get conduit, Romex, the HVAC products, the people that sub out low voltage electrical. We're a low voltage product, and as part of the building process, Kirio is built in during the process of wiring the house and ultimately finishing it.
Okay, so that makes sense. So your product, I guess you kind of mentioned it there. Central Vac is kind of a good example. It does take some know-how to put that particular system in. It takes some kind of install right at the beginning end of the process, and at the end there's no programming a Central Vac. You just plug the hose in and it works, right? So that's not a bad analogy there.
Yeah.
So I guess you are selling through distribution in such a way that you would work, I guess, with electricians and low voltage guys that are out in the field. Is that who is ultimately going to be putting the Kirio product in?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct. So typically in a building scenario, you have maybe the architect, the builder, the general contractor, and then they might sub out the HVAC, and that HVAC company might actually sub out the low voltage. So there's a whole string of people involved, and we work with all of the constituents involved. It just depends on the builder and how they're operating and what they're doing.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've been in the construction market for over 10 years and kind of got out into the programming area, but that totally makes sense as to how that works. So let's talk about. You said that there's parts of Kirio that are built into the home. I guess from the ground up, are there wiring, like hardwired wiring, that needs to be brought back to the central device, or how does Kirio need to be?
Well, let me explain. Yeah, let me explain sort of soup to nuts how Kirio goes into a home. So if you go to the website at mykirio.com, you can see the hardware, but the hardware in some ways is the least interesting aspect of what we do. How do we get around not programming? So there is and I know you want to touch on this in a bit, but there's a certification program, takes a couple of hours, that enables an installer to type in information about the building and what fixtures and devices are going in. That's a really key thing. That's how that information is added, because we don't want the homeowner to have to add this manually. So we have much more information than I think any other product. So we know the square footage of every room. We know what sensors are in the house. We know the fenestration. I mean, literally, we know everything about the structure. The one thing we don't ever have information on is who the actual homeowner is. We never need that information. So that information about the house, it could be typed in by the architect, the planner, the builder. It can be copied over and over again if they're building 50 homes, so they don't have to enter it manually each time. When we enter this information into this configuration program we also spit out things like the wiring map. So literally we can tell an electrician where to plug wires. When they go to pull low voltage wire, which is for thermostats, speakers, data, whatever, they can also pull wire for Kirio, and Kirio comes in two pieces, the back of which plugs into a 2-gang box. So typically low voltage is pulled when it's at the stud level. This is when the wiring maps are generated for us and all the wires pulled, and that's when the initial installation occurs. When the drywall goes up and the rest of it's done, the installer goes back. They plug the main module of Kirio into the base backing, and they pair their phone with the Kirio device. And what was entered into this configuration program then drives the programming and downloads the programming to the Kirio itself.
Yeah, no. Sorry, Rob. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. A lot of our listeners honestly are professionals, and they're totally familiar with like what you're describing in terms of the wiring going in at stud level and, wiring schematics and all of that. What I'm very curious about though is, Kirio seems to talk about being built into the building, and some of the messaging when I was researching the product on the website was really, centered around like the benefits of hard wiring versus wireless technology, which again, a lot of our listeners, that's music to their ears. They totally get that and agree with it. But what type of wiring are you talking about exactly that wires into the Kirio? I mean, is this thermostat wiring, temperature sensors? Like, what are the different types of wiring that a Kirio system would use to control a smart home?
Sure. So, analog and digital inputs. Let me just sort of mention actually, the thing that the Kirio is really focused on is the core systems within a structure, right? So that could be the furnace, the water, the air conditioner. Those systems really are not wireless, and the manufacturers we've spoken to don't have a lot of plans to make them wireless. Moreover, even if you did attach a wireless module, it would raise the cost significantly. So one of the reasons it's not that we don't support wireless, we actually have 7 radios in the device. It's just that if you can put a wired sensor in, it's far less expensive. If you can wire directly to a core component in the house, then you're going to probably have a better experience long-term with less reliability issues. Everybody's had their wireless issues, right? I mean, we had them today.
Sure.
So,
yep.
So generally speaking, if you're a manufacturer also, you don't ever want to have to do a truck roll. That's super expensive to replace wireless or update firmware. So from that standpoint, we want to be wired. The founder, Frank Rougier, built a passive house, and the passive house uses heat exchangers and moves air around the house. And these are actually mandated in places in Europe, and it's a burgeoning thing in the U.S. But this is what the impetus for Kirio was. As it turns out, the systems in the house are discrete. They don't talk to each other. It was very difficult to manage the environment, and that was really the impetus for Kirio, is that he wanted a better way to manage the core systems in the house.
Got it. That makes sense. So obviously a lot of different things we've talked about here. I want to quickly touch on before maybe we zoom out and talk a little bit more high level about the types of systems and different products that you're integrating with and things of that nature. What are the various antennas? Because I know I looked at it on the website, and it looks like you've got an impressive list there, and certainly my intention was not to imply that you guys are not embracing wireless. So talk about your approach to wireless and what the antennas are that you have built into the device.
Right. So Kirio supports Bluetooth, 6LoWPAN, Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Z-Wave, the whole gamut of 802.15. I'll just sort of give you the specs. There's 3 different antennas in the device, and those are for Z-Wave, and then there's 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. And so really that gets back to this operating system aspect that I sort of mentioned, which is that we're really just putting everything in this device so that we can make anything talk to anything else.
Right. And I'm looking at on the tech specs of the device there. Digital IO, analog IO, serial, like RS-232, 440, 422, 485. I mean, this little device can talk to everything I've touched in the last 10, 15 years. Like there's not one thing
right.
you're not prepared for that I can. You even have magnetometer, accelerometer, gyroscopes embedded into the system.
We even have those.
Are you detecting earthquakes?
In case we could do that, and we can. The really interesting thing about Kirio that's important to get is that anything we talk to is predicated on two-way communication. So there's lots of devices that are IoT devices in the home that you see that are really just information sources, but what do you do with it? And my favorite example is, it's not even IoT, but in Seattle where I live, I get an electric bill every month and it says I use too much electricity, but it doesn't have any information about what I could do about it. And so, Kirio is really about being able to take action. And that's why there's so many different communication protocols and methods in the device.
Yeah, I'm going through. On that same page. There was a list of the integrations that you have, and just going through. And I'm floored by how many. I mean, literally every product that I've touched in the last 10 years is on here, and I'm actually floored to see that you guys have had so much integration on a product that's this new. This is really cool. This is really, really cool.
Oh, thank you. There's a very clever a way that we've done drivers that I don't want to go into the technical details of how we did it, but it's different from what other companies are doing.
Okay.
It's what enabled us to get a lot of scale.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, I definitely would be interested in that if you want to talk about it later, but yeah, I can tell that you guys have been busy because this is a lot of work. Even some of the devices on here, don't communicate the same way. I mean, I'm seeing Wi-Fi devices. I'm seeing, train carrier devices that are 485. That's really impressive. So good job. Hats off to the engineering crew there.
Well, thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about the app that the homeowner is going to get on their iOS, Android device. They walk into their house. You said that there's no programming. How do they get set up with the Kirio that's installed?
Right. So the installer, when they finish programming Kirio, they have a 24-hour passkey to the device. And the process is the same whether you're an installer or a homeowner. So I'll just walk you through what happened. They're finishing construction. You pull down a QR code reader, and you scan that QR code with the Kirio app. This is what the installer does as well. They press a button to prove that they're present. The Kirio itself downloads the programming essentially that's based on that structure. And then after 24 hours, that installer is removed from the Kirio permission. When the homeowner moves in, they download the app and they pair with the device, and the programming that was done to the device is then specific to the app they see. So there's no real configuration that the homeowner has to do. It's very, very clever. Normally, when you get stuff, you got to go in and set up the app and do all this rigmarole, but we don't really, what the homeowner sees the very first time is specific to their home. The app's permissioned. If you have teenagers, the last thing you want to do is let them have, control over the heat or air conditioning, for example. I speak as someone who has teenagers. So the first person that that registers as the master, they have permission to add or not add other people. And they have the ability to set permission levels for the other people they add. The identification, this is, again, there's no login or password ever required, is based on the person's phone. That's how we identify a particular user. And there's some secret sauce that we use to encrypt things and whatnot, but essentially it's based around somebody's phone and not an actual individual per se.
Got it. Okay. Interesting approach. Definitely. I'm curious. Presumably the Kirio app allows for things like scene programming, I would imagine. Does it have that, first of all? And second of all, as a broader question, does the user, have access to any sort of customizations? It sounds like it's sort of a turnkey approach, but as an end user, am I able to go in and sort of tweak any of those settings or do any of those small customizations myself?
Well, of course, users can add devices themselves. If they get a Alexa or Google Home or Cortina or something like that, they can add that. They can add light switches and whatever themselves. From a scenarios perspective, that's what we call them. We do some pre-populated scenarios based on what we know is already going into the structure around like dimming lights, vacation mode, away mode, home mode, things like that. And then the user can create them themselves. They can either do it manually by adding a series of devices, or we have the concept of scenario capture, which is whatever you've set up at any given moment, you can capture that and that will create the scenario. So you have your kitchen lights on and you have music going and whatever, then you just capture that and that creates a scenario.
Okay, gotcha. Well, let's zoom out here and talk a little bit more high level. Discuss that decision. Like we've seen so much development in the smart home over the last few years, and of course, all of the rush and craze seems to be heading towards trying to make things DIY and straight to consumer. And Kirio is clearly taking a different tack there as far as their go-to-market strategy. So talk about that decision, to work with builders and a network of certified professionals instead of DIY. What were some of the factors that led you to go that route?
Well, first of all, we wanted to be able to connect to the wired devices. And so that requires an actual electrician. I mean, sure, a do-it-yourself person could do some of that themselves, but we would never be able to sell the product by telling the average person to undo the back of their panel and connect to it, right? That would be a non-starter. Secondly, if you look at the devices that people are bringing in, they're discrete. So one of the big complaints you see a lot is I've got 15 apps on my phone now. And that's because a lot of the products, they are more convenient than what people used to do, but it's really in some ways just moving a switch from a wall to your phone. It's not really everything's still isolated. Our vision is to be completely holistic for any device that you have in the home. And that really requires wire. Secondly, the do-it-yourself gadgets, no disrespect by calling any of those devices gadgets, but the builders have no revenue stream from them. And so there's no incentive for the builder to create a smart home. And you've seen some builders now. There's an announcement in Seattle, a company up here that said they're going to make, quote, smart homes. They're going to add Sonos and some Lutron switches. And that's really cool. That's an acknowledgement that there's a market demand for it, but that's not the same thing as being built in and a profit center for the builders.
Right. And I think we've discussed this on the show in the past. I think we're seeing that being used more as a marketing idea than it actually is a smart home, a quote unquote smart home.
Right.
But yeah, so you've mentioned wiring this in a couple times. So is Kirio really developed around like new builds and remodels? Or can you use Kirio on, like in pure, like if I didn't want to run any wires into my house, could I just plug it in and use it that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. I was just curious about that.
But to give you an example, if you use a ductless heat pump, a mini split, those are wired only.
Right.
There's lots of things like that too. And so you'd sort of have half a solution potentially.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely in the market for one of those, and I record out in my garage. So in Florida, it's kind of hot this time of year.
Right. Sure.
So I'll be looking into getting one of those mini split systems for the garage. But yeah. So what all is involved in becoming Kirio certified? If I'm a professional out there, or I guess a builder too, how do I get onboarded, and what learning process is there for me to get certified with you guys?
It's basically, there's a half day class we teach that people have to go through and pass, and that's it. It's not much to it. We're just now, let me explain where the company is too. We're just now in the process of rolling the product out. So we have a few dozen pilots around Seattle, and by pilot I mean it's a finished product, but partly what we're still refining is how we work with builders and distributors and installers. Our goal is to make sure we understand that process completely this year, and then next year roll out at scale. Having said that, we have had lots of interest, so that may actually accelerate, but I want to make sure, I've done this a few times. I want to make sure that we can service everybody that wants the product in a way that is successful for them too.
Right. All right. I do know that we talked about integration with technology like Amazon Alexa, and I do know also that I saw on your website a mention of HomeKit, which is clearly a technology that's getting a ton of attention. And so talk about how Kirio fits in with an ecosystem like that. Do you see that as a competitor or as a complementary offering?
It's definitely complementary. I think what you'll see over the next 10 or 20 years is that the switches on the walls will slowly disappear, right? There'll be less and less need for those, and you'll have a system like Kirio, which will understand what it is intrinsically that you want out of your house. And when you want to override that, you'll speak to some voice assistant of some sort. That to me is how this will play out. I hope I'm right.
Got it. Yep. A lot of us can say that. Totally. So, I want to make sure we're running tight on our time here, but I want to make sure that we hit on it by name, because you've sort of alluded to it a few times, but I know it's a relatively prominent feature that you guys are displaying on the website, and that is auto learn technology. So give us the quick overview about what's that all about?
Right. The auto learn technology is really machine learning that we derive from how people use their house. So again, every piece of data in Kirio is anonymized. We don't know who the homeowner is, but the data itself by itself is relatively innocuous, right? It's how many times did somebody press a light switch, or what did they set the dimmer level at, or what time do they take a shower every day so that we know when hot water's being drawn, that type of data. But that data is what enables us to optimize the house around them without the homeowner having to request that, right? So it helps us manage energy use, and it helps us provide more comfort and convenience for the homeowner because we know essentially how they live. And that's really the promise of what we're doing. There's three ways that we do this. We use mathematical optimization, and that's essentially, how do you live? How efficient do you want to live? Do you want to save energy and things like that? And we can see that based on the trends and patterns that you use. There's an inductive logic programming, and that's looking at patterns and sequences for different tasks and what the best way is to optimize those. And then there's probabilistic reasoning. So based on the first two, you get this reasoning aspect. It's really the brains of what we have to adjust things according to what's going to be best for the homeowner.
That sounds like, and not to use an overused buzzword these days, but it sounds like the beginnings of AI in the home.
I think so.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, I mean, with all that data.
Yeah, you have to have the contextual information that we have to make that work. That's why a lot of the devices that you see today that have one data point, they kind of work, but not quite. And so, for example, like with temperature, because we know fenestration, we know what the weather is, we know what time of year it is, we know whether the sun's out or not, and we know the temperature in more than one location, lots of locations in a structure. And this is a good example of why wired sensors make sense. They're $2 instead of $150, right? We're able to adjust a temperature in a structure without just looking at a single data point. We can look at it across a broad spectrum of data points.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's that feedback loop that's important. I mean, like you were saying at the beginning,
exactly.
It's more of a two-way communication rather than a one-way, where you're just reading sensors and not doing anything with that data and not acting on it. And I can tell you a lot of home automation systems are one-way systems. The data goes in, it displays on the screen for the homeowner to decide what they want to do, but I would say 99% of the time nobody ever does anything with that information. So it's very interesting, and a very interesting product as well. Rob, thanks so much for taking your time to join us on the show tonight. If somebody wants to reach out with you and connect, what's the best way they can do that?
Info@mykirio.com. And that, let me just spell that. It's info, I hope I don't have to spell that, at mykirio.com.
Excellent. We'll put a link to Kirio in the show notes for sure. So if anybody wants to, they could go over there and link off our website over to yours, because it is a little bit different spelling. So we'll make sure that we have that link on there. Rob, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the interest.
All right.
in Kirio.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye-bye.